There are places that allure with legends and an aura of mystery, and Veretyevo Cemetery is one of them. Located on the border of the Ivanovo and Vladimir regions, it has attracted thrill-seekers for many years. Recently, a team of researchers from the group Kosmopoisk ventured into the ancient church surrounded by the old cemetery, Veretyevo Cemetery. It is truly a mystical place, surrounded by numerous ghost stories and ancient legends. The abandoned village on the border of the Ivanovo and Vladimir regions leads to the old church through a single path overgrown with shrubs. According to folklore, the church was deliberately built in a desolate place to sanctify the land where devilry always occurred. There was a so-called bear corner there, where streams formed a triangle and the elevated area served as a site for pagan rituals on numerous altars. Upon arrival, everyone had a headache, a pressure on the temples and forehead. A certain heaviness was felt from the very beginning. The tree trunks around were lifeless, as if dried up, describes Julia Zhulinskaya, a participant of the research group, the beginning of the expedition. According to her, the peculiarity of the abandoned church is that the altar is not facing east like in Orthodox churches, but has a significant inclination towards the north. The frescoes were also striking. The animal faces looked sinister, and the saints' visages were strange. The peculiar thing is that there is not a single image that has preserved the eyes. Someone scraped them off from all the saints, angels, and animals. In the evening, around 9:30 p.m., a shadow was observed deep inside the church, but personally, I was scared to enter there. However, I was convinced twice that someone was definitely walking there. Looking at the church, I constantly saw a priest with a gray beard, describes the girl her feelings and visions. She notes that as twilight descended, a white cluster resembling a smiling ball appeared in the windows of the second floor. However, Julia noticed that the electromagnetic field sensors placed in the church throughout the night did not register any spikes. So what secrets do abandoned temples and churches hold? Why do people see or hear some supernatural signs? Representatives of the Orthodox Church agree, those who seek will always find. Often, even before entering an abandoned church, people already start anticipating the supernatural. When entering a dark room, one's subconscious mind begins to fantasize. Any gust of wind or rustling becomes ghosts. But there is another side to it. After all, there are psychics, magicians, and sorcerers who can summon dark forces. They do this to lead people away from God. Usually, associating with such individuals does not lead to anything good, says Deacon Georgi, the secretary of the Regional Diocesan Administration. But, in his opinion, ghosts and smiling balls are merely products of human imagination. Now let's share a story from another group of researchers who have previously visited this place. Veretyevo was never a large village. Since ancient times, it has been a secluded settlement with a church surrounded by a cemetery and a few houses for the clergy, which is what we call a Pogost in our region. The initial Veretyevo church was wooden, but in 1802, a new large brick church was consecrated with the main altar dedicated to the icon of the Smolensk Mother of God. A priest from a neighboring village spoke of the blessed nature of the Pogost surroundings, where a sacred key is said to reside. However, we never found this key. According to folklore, the church was intentionally built in a desolate place to sanctify the land where devilry always occurred. There was a so-called bear corner there, where streams formed a triangle, and the elevated area served as a site for pagan rituals on numerous altars, often dedicated to Mokosh. This hypothesis is supported by the name of the Vozigma River, Me being the shortened name of the goddess Mokosh. These altars were used for orgies to ensure the continuation and growth of the clan. Sacrifices were also offered. Special days of worship included May 10th according to the modern calendar, the day of the summer solstice, and the day of the autumn equinox. That's why in this place, to symbolize continuity, one pagan mother was replaced with another Orthodox one, Mokosh with the Mother of God. A temple was built in place of the altar. This structure was erected on the site of a previous wooden church, and the number of centuries it had been there is unknown. Allow me to speculate that, as is often the case, pagan altars were dismantled and the stones were used in the construction of Christian churches. According to local ethnographers, pagans, who lived in the territory of Central Russia until the 18th century, began to worship their old gods in the new churches. Even after the disappearance of paganism, the practice of incorporating stones into the foundations of churches continued. Church officials did not shy away from the energy of these ancient stones. According to beliefs, these stones, even if a person does not believe, exert a magnetic influence on them. Life in Veretyevo quieted down about 40 to 50 years ago. The most likely reason for this seems to be the fact that the Pogost was located far away from other settlements. After the church was closed, the already small population began to leave. In the end, only the teachers of the local school remained, and the last resident of the Pogost was a certain grandmother nun. Information about this place is complex and contradictory, but almost all sources agree on one thing. In the early 1960s, a gang arrived there and devastated the entire Pogost. To cover their tracks, the bandits set fire to the buildings and supposedly burned the only resident of Veretyevo, the nun. Since then, no one has lived there. Such is the legend. But then rumors spread that the icons and church utensils were not stolen. The nun had hidden them some time before the unpleasant visit. Allegedly, she had a vision warning her of the danger. That's why they killed her. They tortured her in the hope of discovering the hiding place. But she never revealed it. She only cursed them and the place itself before her death. Other people claim that the bandits themselves hid everything to facilitate their escape through the swamps. They only took a portion while using the church as a hideout. As an illustration of the people's belief in this legend, the cemetery was dug up in all directions. Graves and the church itself were left in ditches, pits, and holes. Some scoundrels smashed the crosses on the gravestones, excavated 2/3 of the cemetery, painted faces on them, and gouged out the eyes. As someone who is not inclined to believe in mysticism, who measures everything with a scientific ruler, I will say one thing. The place instills fear, panic-inducing, terrifying. At certain moments, you are unable to utter a word. It's as if the place is testing you. In some areas, a dreadful dizziness sets in, and you feel on the verge of fainting. It happened not only to me but also to my companions. There are many twisted trees around the church, indicating a tectonic fault in the earth's crust and the presence of some sinister energy. The uneasiness fades only after crossing the gate, as if returning from the otherworldly realm. Marina and I extensively explored the interior of the church until we reached the altar area. Once inside, the atmosphere felt extremely uncomfortable, particularly on a psychological and emotional level. It was stuffy and noisy. Marina went out, leaving me alone. I stood in the middle for a long time, examining the vault when suddenly everything became quiet. Voices, forest sounds, wind. Complete silence, a vacuum. And then an indistinct rumble began emanating from the walls, followed by recognizable church chanting. A few voices, both male and female. The singing seemed to grow louder, and suddenly it abruptly ceased. All the familiar sounds returned. I visited the place several more times, standing alone for a long time, but I never heard anything else. There is another legend about a vanished expedition of researchers inside the church walls. It is said that several years ago, young scientists arrived in the area with large trunks of various measuring equipment. They spent the whole day studying the church and the surrounding area. They decided to camp inside the church by setting up a tent. By morning, they all disappeared, except for one. He was encountered at dawn by a villager in the nearby forest. His appearance was pitiful and horrifying. Blood was flowing from his nose, his clothes were torn, and the young man's hair had turned gray. From his incoherent and hysterical account, the events unfolded as follows. By midnight, a strong wind arose, escalating into a hurricane. Leaves, branches, and clumps of earth flew into the church. Everyone watched in horror. A dreadful rumble filled the church, and the tent collapsed. It felt as if the walls and the ground were in motion. Then, from all sides outside the walls, there was pounding as if with giant hammers. Panic ensued. The surviving member of the expedition recounted that he managed to crawl on all fours to the altar area and lay there, pressing himself into the ground and covering his head with his hands. He apparently lost consciousness. When he woke up, dawn was breaking, and there was no one in the church. Only a torn tent and remnants of belongings remained. Whether this truly happened, or if it's just another scary story, the whereabouts of the people and the absence of a proper investigation remain questionable. The local residents are convinced otherwise. The Veretyevo Pogost is a sacred place, and there are no anomalies or ghosts there. As the longtime inhabitants of this settlement shared, somewhere nearby, there is a holy spring that performs miracles. However, not every adventurer finds it on the first try. That's all for me. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss out on new videos. Until next time.